So, I started reading The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. First book of the Stormlight Archives. I am 203 pages in, and I have just finished reading part 1. This is a very long book, and these books are very long. This is obviously Brandon Sanderson's epic fantasy series, his big one. And I thought that I would try and make kind of a video on each part as opposed to making one big old video on the whole book, and then maybe make kind of a like a final thoughts video about how I felt about the book overall when I'm done, just to mix things up a bit, because this is a very big book. This book alone is 2 regular fantasy novels, so I'm just going to spread it out because I'm sure that my thoughts will be very jumbled and kind of all over the place if I do it any other way. So I'm going to do it as I go. Yeah, so that's basically just kind of my intro, and I'm going to go on to talk about what I've thought about this book so far. The characters, the setting, not that much about the magic, because there's not really any so far that much. But yeah, this is going to be my thoughts on The Way of Kings, Volume 1 of the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson. Hey, I just want to say, obviously I'm going to be talking about spoilers, so, because this is about part 1, I'm going to be talking about things that happen in part 1, so if you've not read the Stormlight Archives, leave. I don't know what you're here watching a video about a book that you've not read yet, because that's how you get spoiled, but there will be spoilers, so you have been warned. So, first I want to talk about my first impressions in context to what I'd heard about these books before I started reading them. Because, you hear about them. Obviously, you hear about the Stormlight Archives. Everyone, I think, who reads fantasy books and talks to people who do, you're going to have heard this or that about these books. You'd hear things like this. Hey, man, have you read the Stormlight Archives yet? No, I haven't, but it's on my TBR. Oh, man, they're absolutely amazing. But, dude, they're really fucking slow. So you gotta take your time. And they can get a bit boring sometimes, but it's worth it for the payoff. And here I am, having read 200 pages of this book, thinking that it's basically going at a breakneck fucking pace. So much fucking shit has happened in this book, and I'm 200 pages in, okay? A fucking king got assassinated in the first book, some crazy over-the-top, really intense first chapter. That really grips you and pulls you in, and then the guy dies, and it kind of implies something big is going on, and to the guy who assassinates him, that it's so important that he's willing to tell the guy who killed him to try and get someone to be told this information. We've got this guy called Kaladin, who at the start is like a fucking soldier who's trying to work his way up the ranks. Something happens to him, I don't know what yet, but he gets betrayed, I imagine. Something happens to him, and then he ends up a slave. And then for about fucking 80 pages, he's a fucking slave, making his way to this place called the Shattered Plains, where he doesn't know where he's going at this point. And then he fucking ends up at this place, and he gets put through actual living fucking hell. They've got this situation where there's this plain, and it's a bunch of shattered, cracked, basically plateaus with all these crevices in between, and they need to get over these crevices somehow. So they just get fucking slaves and they make them carry these giant bridges. And when they get to the enemy, the enemy just start firing volley after volley of arrows at him. And Kaladin is broken. He's been a fucking slave for 8 months, and now this is it. This is what he finally gets to, and it's just so much worse than he could have ever imagined, and it fucking breaks him. And he has a fucking great character arc of finding his fucking resolve in the first part. And then there's another girl called Shallan whose her family is basically going to become financially ruined, and they're going to lose their power, so she has to come up with a plan to try and basically bring her family back from the brink. And she's gone on this massive journey. She goes to this city called the City of Bells, and she's just doing loads of shit. She's going around talking to people, she's buying books, she's finding out lore, she's drawing pictures of things and then showing us as a sketch. That's fucking cool. And there's so much shit that's happening. It's 200 pages in. I do not understand what the fuck. Maybe it's later on, but so far this book is anything but slow. The pace of the first part is fast. It's fast paced, and I really appreciate that. So I've heard a lot of things about this book so far. not all of it is turning out to be true so far. Specifically, the pacing. I think the pacing's really good. The story is progressing constantly. I don't feel like I'm sat there reading random nonsense at any point. It is constantly interesting. Sometimes don't listen to what other people tell you. Just go read a book and make up your own fucking mind because so far, what I've been told about this book is not necessarily true. So the pace is pretty fucking fast paced. You know, considering how long it is, it's an epic fantasy book. I would say a lot has happened. A lot has been happening. First sixth of this book. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the setting. So the setting, this book is set in Roshar. So far, I find this setting really fucking cool, really interesting. I've always been kind of a fan of these like Dune-esque, drab, fantastical environments within fantasy. I feel like with Lord of the Rings, fantasy is very commonly like, oh look, there's a lot of forests everywhere, and there's elves in the forest, and it's just like England or New Zealand, the countryside, and that's basically the environment, you know. And to be fair, this is a Brandon Sanderson book, and he's done very well in all of his other, well, not all of them, but most of his books to not do that, to do something interesting and different. The ecology of Mistborn is slightly wacky. It's, you know, it's cool to see a setting where, like, there's those little things that make the setting feel so vibrant and unique, like the fact that the plants, because of the storms, have, like, basically evolved to, like, shoot underground, or they have some kind of like protective shell that they kind of shrink back into, kind of in a way that reminds you of like a lot of deep sea creatures like razor clams and things like that, that kind of just like they have a body but they just retract into their shell as soon as anything comes close to them. That's really cool. So far the world building is a bit expository in a way that is okay. I don't mind it, but at the same time, a lot of terms are getting thrown around, a lot of like names for different places and countries and stuff, and I'm not necessarily aware of what this place is. I can look on the map and try and get a rough idea of what people are talking about, but sometimes it's a bit weird. Some of the social stuff is quite interesting. It's also kind of weird. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but it's interesting so far. I find it kind of weird that like society is split down the lines of having light colored eyes or dark colored eyes. Being a bright eye means that you're basically born into a higher station, or you can have better jobs, I think. I'm not really sure exactly how it works so far, but to my understanding, generally speaking, if you're born with bright eyes, good for you. If you're not born with bright eyes, not good for you. You will have a rough time. You're a second-class citizen. Also, the thing with women covering their right hands. Obviously, I know this is a specific cultural thing, to a specific country, but it's not like a general thing. But I thought that was a bit weird, where like they have a safe hand, where they like cover one of their hands up, and it's like a modesty thing. Interesting, but very fucking weird. You know, interesting, I suppose. But yeah, it's very yeah. Don't know how I feel about that one. It's just a bit weird. That's all. One thing that I'm not a massive fan of is the money. The money is like marbles, where they have little tiny, where they have bits of gems in them, and the value of the gem is based on the size of the type of gem and the size of the bit of gem that's inside of it. So you have like a very small shaving of a gem inside of one of these orbs, then that's worth a lot of money. But it can also depend on the type of gem it is. I kind of get it, but at the same time, it's like I'm trying to think about this as a currency and like how that would really work. I guess it is a finite resource, but like I feel like you could just make more if you had glass and a gem. You could just make loads of money. Bit weird. I don't know. Maybe there is like a minting process or something. I don't know. Also, just like visually, I just find it weird to imagine people running around with like glass orbs, and also can't don't they break? Like, what happens if you drop your purse? Like, what happens if one of them splits down the middle? Are you fucked? Can you take it to a bank and get it switched out for a new one? Like, it's a very weird currency. The fabrication of these cannot be simple, surely. I don't know. Bit weird. There's just in the back of my mind, it's like that's got taken a while to set in. I'm not sure how I feel about that exactly yet. Yeah. So the setting so far is interesting. It's cool. There seems to be another race other than humans on this in this setting, called the Pashendi, I think they're called. And then we have the Parshmen as well. And the Parshmen are basically mindless automatons. Parshendi, I think they're called, aren't. They're just like normal humans, but you know they're a different race. Interesting. I don't really know anything about this currently because the only time I've seen them is when they fire arrows at Kaladin when he's on a bridge run. So kind of interesting to see what happens with those guys, see what's going on with them, and then there's the magic. The magic was interesting. I don't know how I feel about it yet. I know it uses something called Stormlight, unsurprisingly, considering the Stormlight Archives is what these books are called. To start off with, there's this guy basically called Seth who's assassinated a king, and he has something called a shard blade, which is fucking cool. It's basically a fancy lightsaber, like a really big two-handed fancy lightsaber that just kind of does it. It just basically cuts the soul. It's like a mind knife. So you attack someone, it doesn't physically kill them, but it does like attack them in another. It damages them in a non-physical manner, and it causes them to die. I'm not exactly sure what it does to someone when it hits them, but I know that it kills them. It seems to be like a spiritual way of killing someone, although I'm not sure. It's kind of that's a bit of a fancy trope in like D&D and stuff, having like a magical psi blade that goes through armor and just attacks the person directly into their mind or something by slashing them with it. It's a bit of a trope, so I don't feel. And they are basically lightsabers, so there's that. They're cool enough, and also there's whatever Seth has. This magical capability where he can kind of bind himself to surfaces and kind of spring around or make objects move towards him. And his use of that was really fucking cool. You can bind objects together and make them slam together and things like that. It was pretty cool. Again, not enough of it has been shown to me for me to really formulate an opinion on it. It was cool. I thought it was interesting that they absorb Stormlight, and they can run around getting these like Stormlight orbs, which are literally the money, and they can basically just fucking run around getting health pickups. He basically runs around getting like fucking mana pickups to keep using his magic. I thought that was pretty cool. Like, this shit begs to be a video game. I thought it was kind of cool, but again, how I feel about that in the long run is kind of yet to be seen. So yeah, the setting so far, pretty cool. Enjoying it quite a lot. Kind of early days for me to say whether I really love it or anything, because I've not really seen much of the setting. It's interesting, there's lots of interesting things going on. The world building is constantly having things thrown at me that I find interesting, so that's good. So next I want to talk about the characters, because I found the characters quite interesting so far. There's two main characters, and one kind of character who's had a few chapters. So the starts off with Seth, who, I think that's how you say his name, who is basically an assassin, who is part of a bizarre religion where he has something called an oath stone. And if someone owns his oath stone, he has to do what that person says. Now, this seems to be like some form of like self-punishment. It's about atoning for something that you've done, or punishing yourself for something that you've done through the awful, shitty elements of humanity, right? So like, if someone gets your oath stone, there's a good chance they're just going to use you, and they're probably a lot of the time they won't be a good person, so you might be forced to do lots of really horrible shit, and you have to do it. It's the Parshendi who have his oath stone, and they order him to assassinate a king, so he does it. Really fucking cool first chapter, I have to say. This was a really cool first chapter, and it full on draws you in. And then at the end, it gives you a little bit of intrigue with the king basically being like, "Oh yeah, there's something. Don't go. There's something I need to tell you." And Seth like writes some stuff on the wall in blood. That was cool. Technically, actually, it might not be the first chapter. I'm not sure, but there are some other chapters which are like set thousands of years before the first, for the current time, where it's a bunch of dudes who I assume are the Knights Radiant. I don't know. Basically, like talking about how like they keep dying and keep getting resummoned, and they just fucking cannot stand it anymore. That's kind of interesting. Not really sure what's going on with that. It seems like maybe there's some kind of force in the world for good or to protect Roshar. When they aren't currently doing their jobs, they get put somewhere else that's pretty fucking horrible to be at. So, they get put into another dimension or something in the meantime and just tormented and tortured or something. I don't know. Weird. Don't know exactly what they are, who they are, but it seems pretty similar to the kind of thing various things Seth has been talking about in his chapters, so I presume it's connected to that, but I don't really know at this point. All I know is that they had shard blades. Then also there's Kaladin. Kaladin, so far, is the most interesting character. quite a likable character right from the start. We see him kind of in his prime, being a good leader for a group of soldiers and basically actually giving a shit about them and keeping them together and managing to have them actually succeed. Uh, um, Basically, war with minimal casualties, which is pretty cool, something I like. And it's instantly made him really likable, like right from the bat, and you kind of want to root for him immediately. And then the next time we see him, he's a slave. And whatever happened in that battle went very wrong. That's all I know so far about what happened in the battle. I don't know exactly what happened, only that he was betrayed. And the nature of that betrayal, I don't currently don't know. But his journey as being a slave and meeting up with this, finding this little like spren that's kind of like become attached to him or bonded to him for some reason and seems to be more intelligent than the average spren and it's just kind of weird, was pretty cool. Really, his character arc so far has been very compelling. This character arc of giving up on life and then finding the will to go on is just a really compelling character arc, and I think it was done really well. It's nothing unusual, right? It's been done a million times before, but the execution was fucking good. So can't really fault that. So far, Kaladin's a pretty fucking sympathetic character. I really want to see him succeed. His experiences as part of Bridge 4 is absolutely horrific. Manza's been through a lot of shit in the first part. It is fucking insane. The amount of shit he's been put through already. The experience of running one of those bridges must be one of the most traumatizing things you could ever imagine. I mean, it's kind of like on the level of like being on a D-Day boat, you know, and just the fucking hatch comes down and the fucking machine gun fire just hits you and people are just dying around you, and it's just all you can do is run towards it, and it's like almost a level of horror that is, you know, it's impossible to comprehend unless you've been through something like that. And that does make Kaladin a very sympathetic character because he's going through some shit and he decides he's going to rise above it and he's going to fucking do what he did before with the men that he had originally when he was a soldier and get a Bridge 4 together. He's going to keep as many of them as alive as he can. He's going to learn all their names. He's going to take over. He's going to do what he fucking can to get everyone through it. So yeah, Kaladin's pretty good so far. Then there's Shallan. Shallan? Not sure how you say it. Shallan, she is a noblewoman whose father has recently died. The circumstances around his death were traumatizing, although I don't know the exact circumstances yet. And she ended up having a shard blade as a result. I'm not sure if the book's trying to hint at it subtly, but it was pretty fucking obvious because she mentions like, oh, like her secret that is only 10 heartbeats away, and I already know from the first chapter that it takes 10 heartbeats to summon your shard blade, so it's not very subtle. So if that was an attempt at subtlety, Brandon failed completely and utterly there, but I suspect that it's not. I suspect that you're supposed to know she has a shard blade from that. But she has a shard blade, presumably it was her father's, and she has basically been forced to go on a journey to try and find an alternate method for her family's financial survival, because currently they're in a massive amount of debt and nobody knows her father is dead. She's currently lied about the fact that, well, their family is lying about the fact that their father is dead, so that basically all the debtors don't find out that he's defaulted on his debts by dying, and will come and start taking it out of their estate and what little they have. And so far it's quite interesting because the world building has largely been done through her as a character. I find her as a character to be quite compelling. She's likable. She has a good motivation for doing what she's doing. I found it not super compelling or interesting to start off with, because basically she's just trying to get this other famous woman to take her in as her apprentice. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine, but it wasn't exactly compelling. But Brandon Sanderson somehow managed to make this into quite a compelling mini character arc, I thought, of her kind. She goes through many ups and downs, she's defeated, and she rises again, you know. I mean, not literally, she doesn't get the shit kicked out of her, but multiple times she's rejected flat out by this person she wants to basically become an apprentice of, but she keeps coming up with new plans, and she perseveres, and eventually she succeeds. And at the end, she drops the fucking bomb that the only reason she wants to become this person's apprentice is that she can steal her magic item and run off with it so that she can find out how to use it and basically save her family from bankruptcy using it. So I thought that was a really cool twist, actually. And I thought that that massively increased how interesting Shannon is as a character and her character arc is. So I'm looking forward to see what happens next with her. Unfortunately, in the next part, I don't think she's a viewpoint character for the next 200 pages. So that is what it is. But I suppose she will get picked up again in a later part. I'm really interested to see what happens with her. I thought the world building through her perspective and a lot of the stuff that's going on with the setting and kind of the introduction to the use of these kind of Stormlight gems on this kind of what's it called, to basically manipulate reality and do various magical stuff. Thought that was pretty cool. I like the economic elements to the magic system in that the access to Stormlight is like a physical energy that's drawn from storms, and you obviously there's only a finite amount of that. There's an economic element to that because there is competition between people for access to that limited resource, and also its use through a magical item that is rare and hard to get a hold of. So that adds another level of kind of, again, coveting these items and these elements of the economy to compete against others and dominate them in the market, so to speak. And I find that kind of world building really interesting. I like economic elements to magic systems. I like when it's like, oh yeah, you can do all this cool stuff with magic, but you need this thing that costs money or is a limited resource, like a magical crystal that you absorb to get your energy, and that costs money. So technically, that's an investment, right? So like every time you cast a spell, there's a cost to it, and you have to balance the cost with how much money that's going to make you if you want to become a successful magician, for example. I like that. I think that's cool. And it's cool to see it here in this book. So I'm interested to see how that develops in the magic system. Obviously, the Knights Radiant have been the Knights Radiant have been name dropped a few times. Not a fucking clue what they are. Guess they're dudes who use Stormlight magic, the stuff that Seth was using. That's what they are, I guess. I mean, I don't really know. I don't really know. So, it'll be interesting to see, because the blurb mentions, "Speak again, the ancient oaths. Life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination, and return to men the shards they once bore. The Knights Radiant must stand again." That sounds like a paladin oath, so that's cool, because paladin's my favourite class. So, we'll see how that goes. Yeah, so far, the characters are really interesting. The plot has been set up nicely, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to keep reading it so far. I just want to say, the actual characters, the actual setting, and this kind of story setup so far has been really fucking interesting, and I'm really looking forward to see what happens next. This is definitely, I would say, the strongest start to a Brandon Sanderson book that I've read so far. The strongest start to a Brandon Sanderson series that I've read so far. I loved Mistborn, but I thought it had a bit of a weak start. On the first kind of third of the first book was a bit slow and a bit weak, I thought. Massively improves in quality once Vin starts using Allomancy, but until that point it's a bit eh. Also, Vin's kind of hard to like to start off with. Then part 2 came out, Era 2 rather. That also had a bit of a slow start because the first book wasn't great. I mean, it was good, but it wasn't, it wasn't that great. It was okay. So this one's like by far the strongest start to a Brandon Sanderson book I've seen so far. Looking forward to reading the rest of it. So far, really good. It's living up to its name. Obviously, like I said, people say a lot of things about this book, and I don't think it's true so far from my experience reading it. I think the pacing is pretty fucking breakneck, to be honest with you. For 200 pages in, I mean, for a big fantasy series, it's fucking fast. Most big fantasy books or fantasy series, like the fucking the farm boy who's the main character would still be on the farm like 300 pages into the 800-page book. You know what I mean? Like, whereas this is like Kaladin's gone through an entire character arc, Shan's gone through an entire character arc, and we're 200 pages in. So far, really impressed. The plot, don't really have anything to say about the plot. The plot exists. It's a plot. Again, really early in, I'm basically in the first sixth. There's going to be a big bad that turns up, this kind of like void or whatever it is that gets mentioned in the first part of the book, in the flashback to 4,000 years ago. Presumably that's going to turn up again. Presumably the main bad guy is going to be a shard of some description. Odium got mentioned in Era 2 of Mistborn, and I have read Heredity of Mistborn. All I know is that odium is, I think it was hatred, or something like that. Hatred, I think it was. The Shard of Hatred. If the Shard of Hatred exists on Roshar, it would make sense that he would be the main villain. Now, I don't know what shards, if any. I mean, there will be some, because there's Investiture. We already know there's Investiture. On Roshar, it could be odium, though I wouldn't say that the powers and abilities that I've seen thematically really fit odium. Hatred, I wouldn't say. But you never know. He might just kind of turn up and be like, I'm going to fuck up the dudes who are here. Presumably the Spren as well are related to a shard. Maybe it's like a shard of nature or a shard of spirit or something. And maybe there's another one as well. I don't know. We'll see. It'd be cool to see if there's multiple, because there were multiple shards on Scadrial, obviously. Ruin and Preservation. It became Harmony. So it'll be interesting to see what's going on in Roshar in that regard, and what gods, what shards there are, and how exactly that ties into the world building. Yeah, so I think that's most of my thoughts on this so far. So far, really good. Really enjoying it. I'm impressed with it. Fast paced, it's interesting, everything that's happening is cool. It's got that emotional resonance. It's got some darkness, it's not just too happy-go-lucky, you know. The setting's a bit less dark than Scadrial is, but at the same time, that fucked up element of all the bad things that are happening, like the war and the inherent injustices in society that exist, that have been revealed so far, kind of keep me want to keep reading. So far, good shit.